So today we are going to be having a live stream, and we're going to do a thought experiment where we mock expansion draft for the LCS. So we imagine that the LCS is adding another team and that they're having an expansion draft where the new team gets to select some players from the other teams under a certain set of rules. The first step we need to follow is, I'm going to switch over to the spreadsheet I've been working on. Let me know if you can't read. Maybe I should zoom in a little bit more on it. If I can. Or just, yeah. That's probably going to be easier to manage. Move my camera out of the way a bit more. Okay, here we go. So what I've set up is I went to the contracts database. This is actually accurate as of today. And I've pulled in kind of all the existing player contracts that the LCS teams have, and I've done a few things. One is that I have flagged contracts that end this year, and those are pending free agents. So those are players that in an expansion draft, a new org would not draft these players because you're going to try to sign them as a free agent. There's no point, or very little point, doing this. Who will leave their carry price unprotected? Yes, very relevant. And naturally, one of the things that inspired me to think about expansion drafting was that the NHL is going through one right now with the Seattle Kraken and Montreal Canadiens leaving carry price unprotected, a big star player, franchise player, hoping that his contract size and injury history mean that they won't pick him. We will see. We might end up with some of those scenarios in this kind of exercise. So yeah, I've flagged team players that are pending free agents. And then I've put in, basically you can mark a player protected or leave them unprotected. So the rule set that I want to work with here, and I'm going to write it out as we kind of think about it, is I want teams to be able to protect 4 players. And at least one of those players has to come from their academy lineup. So this is something that is a lot more practical when I'm kind of controlling this. Because the rule set you'd follow for, I guess you could put in some kind of like minimum number of games played in the LCS or academy level, whatever, to define what an academy player is, but I think we can just use, since we're just doing this as a thought exercise, we can, bit of a rule of thumb. Yeah, so FlyQuest is a bit of a weird one. That's a good call out by Fly there. So no, these are good questions because we have to be careful how we handle this. I'm not sure what this disaster draft scenario thing is that Lane's bringing up. Disaster is like what, they have to replace a whole team or something. I don't want to drag the energy level down by going off and reading something else, but if you have any specific ideas to share, I think I'm open to feedback on this kind of number of players protected. So what I want to do is I want teams to be able to protect enough players that they aren't like feeling completely exposed. But I don't want them to protect so many players that the new org has super limited options. So if you could protect 4 of your LCS players, I think that's going to make it really hard to build a new org. And I want the goal to be that you build out, a full LCS roster and most of academy or something like that. Like I want the new org to end up with 8 or 9 players. You get to hold on to 5 players in this scenario. Okay. Interesting. Well, yeah, I think that's pretty limited. So, I mean, yeah, an NBA roster would be what, like 12 to 15? And this is a little tighter than that, especially given that you have kind of the LCS Academy divide, which is a little different. Yeah, so there's a difference between a new org buying into the league and just starting with no contracts versus like this is specifically intended to be an expansion draft. which is a very different kind of a thing. So whether or not this is realistic to what could actually happen in the LCS is kind of beside the point. I think it probably isn't really realistic to what they would do, especially since rosters do change so fluidly, but I still think it's a fun way to approach things. I feel pretty good about protecting 4 players. Let's say that at least one of the players they protect has to have played more than half of the year in Academy, something like that. I mean, it really is only FlyQuest that messes with this. I don't know. We can talk about that. I think you can protect more than one that is considered an Academy player. So FlyQuest could choose, if you considered, Jose Deodo, Palafox, Johnson, and Dreams to be, their actual LCS team under the whatever rule set we're using, they could still protect more than one of the other group. In fact, they could protect 4 of the other group. But I'm saying at least one has to come from, at least one of those players has to have played the majority of the year in Academy. Let's say that. We would have to tighten that up with a lot more specific rules if we were going to do this kind of quote-unquote for real, but Griff says we should protect the entire LCS roster plus 1 Academy player. I think that's a stretch. That affects different teams in very different ways. Yeah. No, I don't want any teams to be able to protect their entire LCS roster. I think that's too restrictive. We are not including like imports or free agents or so on, because they can still fit in other free agents as much as they want around this, right? So what I want is, based on being able to protect 4 players under this framework, I want to spend a little time. I want to freeze up to row 3. First, figuring out which players I think. Oh, come on. Which players I think would be protected by each org. So I'm going to do this in a way that it looks good to me. Spreadsheet, a very minimal level of spreadsheet aesthetics. There we go. That's better. That's better. Five Fire is someone that you wouldn't pick in your expansion draft. You try to sign him as a free agent, right? So he wouldn't be part of this. Budget is beside the point. So let's get things started. We'll go alphabetically. 100 Thieves. So who would I predict? And I'm curious what you guys, who you guys would protect. So feel free to throw that out there. As I think through it a bit, I'm definitely protecting FBI. I think I'm protecting Abadaga. Now the question is actually a little more complicated, because like who he is another option, and then you protect one Academy player. But you know what I would probably do? I think FBI could play with other supports. And I think Tenacity and Kenby are too valuable. I would probably protect both Tenacity and Kenby. Probably FBI, Abadaga, Tenacity, Kenby. That's my leaning. I'm curious if they think how close they think Poom might be. But so you also have to predict, like, here's what makes it really, really challenging here. You have to think who might get picked away from me. Not only who's the most valuable to me, but who is actually going to be at risk, which relates to who's going to be available from the other teams, right? So like what do you risk if you expose a certain player? If you expose Closer, do you think that there's going to be another jungler exposed who'd be picked over him? Or same thing for Huhi, or so on. So let's see like who some of the other supports are. Vulcan. If I'm 100 Thieves, I'm thinking C9 probably protects Vulcan. So I'm looking for supports that are kind of, similar quality to Huhi. I think Smoothie is a pending free agent anyways. Aframu is a pending free agent. I think the support market out there is going to be pretty decent this coming off season. I don't think Ignar gets supported, gets protected. Diamond and Dreams. Dreams is a free agent. I mean, I don't think people would pick Diamond over Huhi. Newbie and Chime, I don't think either of them would get picked over Huhi. Joey and Destiny, I don't think either of them get picked over Huhi. Core JJ will get protected for sure. Ayla is actually an interesting option. And Isles from Cloud9 as well. Did I just miss them? Sword Art, I don't really know. I don't know if an expansion team is going to want to take on Sword Art's contract, even if he is exposed. Yeah. I don't think Cloud9... So Cloud9 would probably... There's a chance they could expose Vulcan if they think they can just move Isles up. Yeah. I don't know. I think if I'm 100 Thieves, I'm taking the risk with Huhi. I think they've got a really close attachment to Tenacity and Kenvi, and I think Abadaga and FBI are too big of stars to let go. I do feel good about this one, but there's an argument for it. Yeah, for sure. At a certain point, I will probably expose this spreadsheet for other people as well, by the way. So let's work with that for now. So Cloud9 is trickier than you'd think. Cloud9 is definitely tricky. Like, I don't think you can afford to let Perks go, even if his level of play right now isn't great. Like if he plays as poorly in the playoffs as he has played at the beginning of summer, and I think he's been coming back a little bit. I mean, but he just has so much name brand to him. I don't think you can let him go. But then it gets really tough. You got Fudge, Blabber, and Vulcan, and Vulcan. I think you do expose Sven. I think he's the most replaceable, which is not to say he's lower quality than the other players, but I think you can find another player if you lose him. You're going to protect one academy player. Man, I don't know. Because, like, I love Fudge. It is tempting to protect Fudge, Blabber, and Vulcan, but... Man. It's really tough. And I feel like I don't really have a clear read on, again, so like if Vulcan's exposed, I think he's gone no matter what. And I don't like the idea of replacing him. Like, even though I like Isles, I would not want to move Isles up and let Vulcan go. I actually think Vulcan has been playing a lot better this summer than some of the narrative around him too. Blabber is a tricky one. So I'm curious from the Fudge perspective, how well would Fudge perform without a jungler like Blabber, who's so good at capitalizing on the gankable lanes that Fudge sets up? And I mean, and to be fair in the other direction, how well can Blabber play without lanes that are good at setting him up for those ganks? I think we've seen a longer period of what Blabber can do, but we've also seen C9 fail with Blabber. We've seen kind of both edges of his sword, so to speak. Fudge is like more of obviously he's younger and less experienced still. My leaning is that I think Blabber is he's a bigger brand piece, and I think he's still a better player. That's just my perspective on it. But man, if you expose Fudge, he's gone. I have to think. I don't want to. I might. Would I let Perks get picked? Because he's also gone, for sure. Man, oh man. I don't know. Yeah, so who do you replace? So internally you could move Isles up and replace Vulcan. I'm basing this on one expansion team, but I think with this level of protection, you could do two expansion teams as well. I think you could. Obviously, be a lot thinner on the talent then, but I don't know. Can we do a vote or something? Can I? I know I can do it. I just got to figure out how again. Well, Copy is not LCS ready, and I think he needs at least another year. I don't think by the end of this year he's going to be LCS ready, unfortunately. Like, unfortunately, in the sense of like, it would be great if he was. Like, not that it's like, oh no, he's not a good prospect anymore. But Copy is like, I'm very interested in Copy still as a prospect, but I think like he's got some stuff he needs to work out. Like Copy is one where somebody might pick him up, but they wouldn't pick him up to put him in LCS. Okay. If I'm Cloud9, who could I replace with just a free agent potentially too, right? In terms of Academy, the only way I'm protecting Isles is if I'm exposing Vulcan. Otherwise, I'm protecting King because I'm assuming Sven is probably going to get picked. And anybody who got down on King because of Cloud9's start to the split should just watch how Cloud9 continued to play once Sven was back. It wasn't much better. You consider the contract stuff with perks. Yeah. I mean, that's a similar thing with Sword Art. Like, I think it goes both ways. You could think, is another team going to pick him away from us and have to pay him such a high salary, right? Because I'm treating this as the contract goes with them, which is a very traditional sports kind of a thing. In League, I think they would just renegotiate new contracts and whatever all the time. Like when you buy out a player, you also give them a new contract generally. You don't inherit the existing contract, but Cloud9 Academy as a whole hasn't been doing that well this split. I really don't know what to do here. I think mid jungle is just more important to me in the end. I think I would have an easier time. Like Fudge is good, and I really like him, but I think I would have an easier time finding a top laner who will kind of check the right boxes. Whereas jungle is, I just think like if you're going to prioritize which roles do you want to have the best players in to build the best team, like jungle and support are at the top for me, and then mid, and then top and bot. And I just think I could find another, maybe not a top laner as good as Fudge, but I could find somebody else easier than I could find a replacement for Blabber. So I don't know, but I'm really torn on this. I could unprotect perks and protect. I don't know, but we can't spend forever talking about Cloud9. CLG, well, most of their team is becoming a free agent, anyways. Protect Thien, and I guess you protect Wild Turtle and Finn because you can. I mean, you protect the players, and then if the other team really wants them, you offer them a trade or something. And Katsuri. Sure, why not? I don't know. I didn't even realize before I set this up that they had so many one-year contracts. In Run It this week, which I think is actually coming out tomorrow, not today, I've got a bit of a CLG joke. Sorry, CLG. It's minor, but I think it's funny. Oh yeah, which reminds me, I should be putting that script up on Patreon. Dignitas. I'm protecting Fake God. They also have a lot of free agents coming up. I'm protecting Fake God, Soligo, Neo. If Aphromu was going to still be under contract, I'd probably keep him around. And then Spawn, maybe, just as like young player with potential. Will is weird. I don't like. Technically, his contract only goes to the end of this year, and I can't understand why. But like, as a 16-year-old, he should be like he is part of their long-term plans. Like, I might just override this contract end because they've got to be signing him. I should ask them, like, why in the world do you guys have Will on a 1-year contract? I'm gonna override it. This is a good shout out. So forget it. He's protected. This guy's gonna be part of their future. I mean, he was on an amateur contract, but you can't move him up to academy without giving him another contract. You have to give him an academy contract because there's a minimum pay level and all that kind of stuff. So no, he's on an academy contract. Amateur contracts are only allowed to last through to the end of the current year, though. Yeah, let's just override that and say we're protecting Will. EG. Another bit of a tough one. Okay, no-brainer. You're protecting JoJo. Absolute no-brainer. Danny, you're keeping. He's a future piece. Impact, you're keeping. And you got one more. Jizuka's a free agent. And your hope is that by January, JoJo's ready to step into that spot. And if he's not, then you sign another free agent or you bring Jizuka back, whatever. So some options would be Svenskeren, Ignar, Tony Top contracts. I think you don't need a guy like Team Luke, even though he's a pretty interesting prospect, because you have Danny, who like just broke in and is looking like a long-term piece. Mystiques is a little bit more experienced than some of these guys. I think he's someone that, I mean, he's been playing better lately, but I think he's someone that you haven't really locked in on as something to move up for the future. My first inclination is contracts, but he's on the same contract length as Svenskeren. I think Svenskeren's been playing a lot better this summer than he had been in spring. Tony Top is intriguing, but you've got Impact. How long are you going to have Impact around doing that? Ignar is like, I don't know. I don't think it's that hard to find a support to play at the level of Ignar, personally. I think you protect one of the junglers. I think you let some of these other pieces go. I personally like contracts a little bit more than Svenskeren, but I do definitely recognize that Sven has been playing better. But I think contracts is a little bit like he's been playing with JoJo. He's had good stuff with Impact in the past, and he fits kind of the mindset and play style a little more that I think EG is going to want to continue to go for, especially with JoJo coming in. So I think that comfort with our brand new rookie mid laner for next year is going to be important. And there's also a difference between just ranking the players internally and saying, hey, Svenskeren's better than contracts. That's not necessarily the straight up story. It can be Svenskeren is better with an Impact, Jizuka, Danny, Ignar lineup. But if you move JoJo up for next year, that could change the entire story. And I think contracts and JoJo work well together, and I think they work a lot better together than JoJo and Svenskeren would. Svenskeren might get picked up, I'm not sure. So let's move from there. FlyQuest, now we have to decide, do we want to do what we think FlyQuest would do or what we would do if we were FlyQuest? And I think we're doing more of the latter. I like NXI's development this year. The expansion team will pick 9 players in total with no more than one from any other team. That's it. I should have written that in, but I think FlyQuest has decided that Kumo is someone they would protect. I'm not personally so certain. But what are the other options? I think Philip as like a brand new, really young player is someone that you talk about, but I don't know that another team's going to feel like it's time to sweep in and grab him. So I think you probably leave him. I think they're going to protect Kumo. Palafox is a better player than Triple in my opinion, and I would protect him. And then after that, I'm not sure what. Like if it was just straight up me, I would probably hold on to Palafox, NXI, like maybe even Philip and Tomo or something like that. Philip and Diamond. I think for next year, if NXI continues to improve, I might look at him as my option for next year. I'm just like, I guess when I look at what FlyQuest has lined up, I'm kind of just ready to make a big shuffle on things. And so I don't mind too much if some of the pieces get taken away. So it's not necessarily a matter of protecting the best players when I look at it that way, which maybe is not the right way to look at it. I'm not sure they're going to be ready to move forward into 2022 with Jose Dioto again. Then again, and especially if we're going to keep NXI, like, do we keep both of those junglers? I don't think we do. I think we keep the one that we want to have for the longer term. And Tomo is also a player who, if your exposure to Tomo has been mostly or only from his time in the LCS over the past couple of weeks, that's going to tell you a little bit of a different story about him than if you've been watching the Academy for the past almost a year. I think he's a player who could break into become a steady LCS player, but I'm not sure of it. So, but I think it's enough. I think there's enough there that I'm willing to keep trying to find out with him. And positionally, it does give me that anchor. So, yeah, I can be brought on board with that. All right, Golden Guardians. Licorice. Yes. Ablaze Olive. Yes. Prismal. Yes. And then what? So Iconic, probably. It's Iconic or Chime. And I'm not really sure on either. I'm not fully in love with either, to be honest. Like, they're both doing pretty well and definitely fitting into the team concept really well, which is, I think, the really impressive thing about Golden Guardians at the moment is how well they're playing as a team. I think given that this is going to be very much a solo lanes oriented team, or has been, like, I think Licorice and Ablaze Olive are the ones carrying Golden Guardians right now. I think finding a jungler who can fit in and do what they need them to do is probably going to be a little easier. Whereas Prismal and Chime have played a lot together. And if I say going into next year that's going to be my bot lane duo, then I probably want to keep them together. And if I have to, and I don't think Iconic's going to get taken away probably. But if he does, if I have to, I think I'll be able to find a jungler that can fit in with these guys. That is my take. At the same time, like, you're probably going to want to add in another veteran, and maybe having a veteran support would be something that you want to bring in. But this is somewhere, if I had a lot of time, I would go through, like, who do I think is going to be available, jungle and support, as free agents. I mean, we can take a quick scan through it right now. Free agent junglers and supports. Broxa, Smoothie, Aframu. Like, maybe we make a run at Aframu. Maybe we leave China up and make a run at Aframu. That's actually really interesting. And we also have import slots for what it's worth. Dreams. Santorin's going to be a free agent. I mean, you hope he can get his health back. It's really like Santorin and Aframu are the names really worth paying attention to. And I think like a Santorin with a Licorice and a Blaze Olive could be a pretty good fit. An Aframu with a Prismal, I would love that. But are you going to bank your expansion draft strategy on who you might get in free agency? That's tricky. Yeah, I'm 50-50 on these. So, I don't know. You could go either way with it. I'm going to stick with protecting Chime, but yeah, I think it's very reasonable to go either direction on it. Immortals. This is a tricky one. So, I think the individual skill level between their LCS and Academy teams is fairly similar. So it makes it really hard to know, like, how much would we be willing to mix and match those going into next year if parts of it get picked away from us. And also how much, like, so I think the stronger performing on an individual level part has been the top side. But I think that's the case in the Academy team as well. Viper and Pretty are the core of the Academy team too. I think between Revenge and Viper, if one of those got taken away, we could move forward with the other. Revenge is obviously the less experienced player who I feel like I'm going to be a little more, like, I'm hoping that he gets left with me so that I can see what happens with him. But I'm probably going to leave both of them exposed but only if it allows me to protect somebody else that's important. I think Xerxes is probably the strongest individual player right now. But mid lane too, Insanity and Pretty, like, take one of them and I'll work with the other is kind of how it feels. If I was Immortals, and this applies to some of the other teams too, I'm probably trying to swing a deal of some kind with this new org. Like, no, actually, I don't know. I don't know how much I would feel the real need to control this. I don't know, man. Just add Andre. I think if I feel like Xerxes has some years left in him, then I don't need to worry about. So, like, Anda pairs really well with Viper, and he's been, those three have been working well together. But I don't think Anda is a better jungler or as good a jungler as Xerxes. He's kind of like a Santorin light kind of a thing. Yeah, Death AFM says, I feel like Immortals could just protect nobody and roll with whoever they have left. That's kind of how I'm feeling with it. Like, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna lose one player or two players if it's a double expansion, but I've got a pretty good spread, right? Yeah. I don't think people around the league have as high an opinion of Pretty and his value as I do. So I'm probably willing to leave him exposed. I think let's throw something out here. What if we did this? And man, like between Viper and Pretty, I think either of them might get picked up by the quote unquote right team, but also have a pretty good chance to just be kind of left there. Yeah, let's go with this. Yeah, I don't know much about the team comms or stuff like that. I know that from the Twitter Spaces thing we did last night with Andre and with Revenge, they were saying that Xerxes and Destiny really drive the emotional state of the team. So that's an interesting thing, but they weren't talking about like shot calling. So the thing about Viper and the fact that he was on no org, I'm fairly certain he had academy offers and decided he didn't want to play in academy right away. He wanted to spend a split in amateur, kind of rebuilding his confidence and finding his passion back for the game and stuff, which he did. He destroyed it. Like he was the best player in the combination of amateur and academy. And, you know, obviously winning proving grounds and all of that kind of stuff. And then he was ready to move up back up into academy. And I don't think that necessarily reflects that no teams were interested in him. They weren't interested in him for the LCS. But I think, especially with the first half of summer being him playing from remote because of visas, and now he's in LA for the past couple of weeks, and like they're really starting to click more and more, all of that kind of stuff. Like I think he is making a case that he could be back in the LCS next year. It's not a guaranteed thing, but I think he's making a case for himself and a pretty good one. So I can see teams potentially seeing that, and you'd want to build the right kind of roster to fit him into, but making him a piece, I think it could happen. Team Liquid. Well, Core JJ is a given. You probably protect Ayla and try to sell his contract. But now what? A lot of free agency here. Alfari, I guess you're trying to get a buyout for him. Probably. I guess. Jensen's been playing better in summer, but I thought he was pretty poor in spring, honestly. Between Jensen and Tactical. So if I'm going to have, Core JJ is an import, but everybody's talking about him likely getting a green card soon. That would affect my strategy here, right? If he becomes a resident, then I can import. Then I could potentially expose, either Jensen or Tactical and go for a big import there. If I'm going to sell Alfari, I've got room for another big import. Big free agents, let's see, because that's the Team Liquid way, is to just go after big free agents. Who really is there? We already talked about Aframu. We already talked about, the other one. Centaurine is the other one who's coming from our own team. There isn't really a lot of big free agency openings going on. Jensen's contract is not meaningfully higher than a lot of other players at a similar level, like Alfari and so on. But the thing is, like, maybe they've mended the relationship with Alfari enough that you keep him. Maybe. I don't know. I've felt like that would be, hey, let's go to November and then part ways one way or another. Tactical, I think you probably feel at this point that you can try to replace somehow if you have to. And even if Jensen isn't like a top 2 mid in the league, he's still a pretty solid and reliable kind of a player who you've invested into a lot in terms of your branding and so on. So, man. Jan is if Jan was laning with Core JJ, he'd be fine. But I don't know. I think if you just swapped Jan in for tactical right now, you'd be missing tactical in a bit, which is not flame on Jan, but like tactical's not that bad, and Jan is quite inexperienced still. I think you protect Jensen. Yeah, definitely the Core JJ green card situation could affect a lot of this, but I think that's where I'm going to go. I mean, you could also expose Ayla and protect tactical, but I think Team Liquid's going to go into this offseason wanting to do at least a partial rebuild of their roster anyways. And I think having Ayla to try to sell him up to another team is probably what they're going to want. Okay, TSM, Spica is guaranteed. Sword Art, you're going to expose him and assume that nobody's going to want to take his contract off you. Takeover, I think you should protect. So like it could be Huni and PoE, but if you have Takeover coming, I think Takeover might be ready next year. And of course, from the TSM perspective, and for any of these individual team perspectives, we don't know who's going to be exposed by the other teams. So we couldn't say, for example, oh, Jensen's being left exposed if he was, and so therefore we don't have to protect Power of Evil or something like that. Like, we don't know that, but who would we guess? I think Spica and Huni and kind of the partnership there is a pretty good pairing to go forward with. Power of Evil as a sellable resource, sure. I think Lost probably won't get taken away from us, and if he does, we can probably deal with it. I think I'd protect PoE before I protect Lost. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Lost will stick around with TSM for next year. Depends on what they think of how he's performed, right? Like the internal perspective can be different than the external perspective. I wouldn't protect Yerson to this. I think you've got Sword Art and you're assuming that nobody's going to take him. And so if you do lose your son, you still have Sword Art for your actual starter, and then you can there's no actual expansion. This is just a thought experiment. I don't think somebody would take Sword Art away and pay him $3 million a year. Excuse me. I think that's what I'm gonna do. So the adjustments that could come to this. So now we're gonna switch over. We are going to become Phoenix One, re-entering the league, rising from the ashes. And so the next thing we have to do then is we can play this out a couple of times. We can do it with one team. We can do it with two teams. I'll do it with one for now. Man, I think you could build a pretty good team. And I think if you're Cloud9 and you left Fudge available, and then you find out that Someday was also exposed, or is that the only other like high quality top lane exposed? I guess Viper as well. Maybe you feel okay. Yeah, P1 Phoenix 1 is the org that runs Sentinels. Yes. No, we're not naming ourselves TSM. So let's make a list of the highest profile exposed players. Some options, okay? Someday, Closer, Huhi, Fudge, Sven. So that's a pretty good start. Isles, I think. Scarin, Ignar. Sure, let's include Jose Dioto in that. Iconic. I'd say Viper and Andar, worth having the list. Tactical. Lost Sword Art. Those are kind of like the most exciting names. And there's a rule: no more than one player from the same org. So let's start like prioritizing these. It would have been good for me to copy their role in their team, but I also just kind of know them. So, we'll tier these out a little bit. Trying to get just a rough idea of the tier list here. Yeah, all the mids protected. That's interesting, huh? So you're going to have to go free agent for your mid laner, which is fine. And yeah, there aren't really free agent mids coming either, are there? I mean, triple Jizuke is going to be a free agent. And you could do a lot worse. Jizuke, Pobelter, Damonte. So let's include that in our... Eesh, what is wrong with me? I cannot type. I'm doing these kind of like candidate picks as kind of a tier list. Let's do something like this. Sword Art, I guess I'll put up there just to make it sort of fit. So what do I go with here? So if you're the only team drafting, that makes it a lot simpler. If it's two different teams drafting, you got to think about the order you do it in, right? And whether you're the first pick, second pick. What team would I build out of this? Let's flag. So like top lane options would be Fudge, Someday Viper. I'm probably going to want to take Fudge, and that locks me out of Sven. But I'm okay with that probably. So would I rather... So if I take Fudge and don't take Someday... So it's like I could either take Someday and Sven, for example, or Fudge and what, either Tactical or Lost. It's actually it's difficult because I think Fudge is a slightly better player than Someday, but I think Someday is he's a little more self-sustaining. I'm not going to need... Like, I think Someday can work with a wider variety of jungling or team styles than Fudge can right now. Luger, yeah. I should have had him on the list, actually, because it's a good call out. Luger and Poom, for what it's worth. Luger is an import, something to consider. Just skipped over that one. let's see what it looks like if we go with Someday here. So if I do Someday, that means I can do Sven. I'm gonna pencil in Jizuke, go after him as a free agent mid, because again, like there weren't good mids exposed in the draft, so I'm gonna make a big run at Jizuke as a free agent. If I don't get him, I'm gonna have to bring in somebody else. Zazel as a free agent. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how to stack him up against some of the other options. I'd go after Afremu first. This is a good point. No, Someday has his green card. Someday's domestic. So at jungle and support, our jungle options are Closer, Svenskeren, Jose, Iconic, and it's between Closer and Svenskeren. We're getting a very veteran team doing this. No, we can't do Closer because of 100 Thieves. We can't have 200 Thieves. So we do Svenskeren then. And then what? And if we take Someday, we can't take Hui. Hey, Izard, this is just a thought experiment. This is just purely for fun. Yeah. And if the league does expand, I don't think they'll do an expansion draft. You're right. Ignore is not an option if you have Svenskeren. Isles. Did we take a Cloud9 yet? Yeah, we took Sven, so we can't take Isles. We could do Tactical and Isles. We could do Sven and Poom. We could do Sven and Sword Art. Poom is also 100 Thieves. Very good point. Yeah, this is tricky. This is why I should have put the teams alongside. You're right. This is very tricky. What if we... No, I mean... Afremu is the only really notable support free agent. So with both Jizuke and Afremu, like, we don't want to make big assumptions, but we can also draft for Academy and draft for the future, right? And look for some exposed prospects. Yeah, here, I'll clarify this. Are there any prospects that we'd really want to go after? Excuse me. And you could define Poom that way. Copy, but you can only take one player from C9, and you're going to definitely want either Fudge or... I think you're going to want either Fudge or Sven, or even Isles before you go for copy. Yeah, XM macro is a pretty good option, I think. I think Someday is hampering us a bit because there's so many 100 Thieves options. And I think prioritizing top lane that highly is a little, for Someday with some of the other options, there's a little rough. So I think it probably does make sense to go for Fudge here. Then we can go for... Yeah, Tactical and Hui is an option. Let's pencil that in because I think I like that. Now here's something interesting. What if we add in Viper from Immortals? And I think there are things that Viper does with his aggression and like demand, like applying pressure in lane that Fudge can learn from. I think those two could push each other in a good way. I could format a lot of this, but I don't know if it's worth the time. Here, let's start to clear this up. So we have options from What do we have options from? Fly. You know what we should do? What I should do is line this up like here are all the orgs and the player you're taking from them. That would be smart. So we have an option to take someone from Dig still. We have an option from CLG, Dig, GG. Who am I missing? TSM. We could grab Yersan. We could grab Lost instead of Tactical. It depends how we feel about the two of them. It's hard to say, actually. I don't think there's value in having both Lost and Tactical. Hyper is kind of interesting. I think he's been catching my eye more lately. If we're going to take anybody from them, it's either Hyper or Yersan. I think I'd go with Yersan. I think it would depend on my coaching staff and how well I think they would work with him, because I think Yersan has some really good skills. But from what I see purely from the outside, not knowing comms or anything like that, he needs to be coached in a certain way to kind of like mold the way he plays. So, but it might be worth trying that out. From GG. I'm probably taking Rosethorn. Yeah, between like Iconic is obviously playing better than Rosethorn right now, so that's a fair shout. Yeah, I think Rosethorn has been really coming on in Academy lately, but Iconic has had more experience and opportunity playing in the LCS level. So him as a mentee to Svenskeren probably does make sense. Yeah, we're only taking 9 inches because of free agents, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 2 more players out of Fly, Dig, or CLG. From Fly, grab a 16-year-old. We already have 2 top laners, though. And what do we need positionally in our academy team? We've got top jungle support. So, I don't know. We take Johnson. And yeah. I guess. No, we could grab Yusui because winning games in Academy does matter. So it depends. Like we could either pick Yusui and Johnson, or we could pick Spawn, who's a bit more of a prospect than either of the two of them. But then we've got nothing for mid, really. So I think we have to do that. So I think having done this, I think picking 8 total players might make more sense than 9, because picking 9 players leaves so little room for free agency, and it gets really thin by the end of it. On like, not in terms of player quality, like I'm not saying Johnson and Yusui aren't like worthwhile players, but the number of options available to work with, and especially if you're trying to, at this point, build an academy program that can develop a talent pipeline. It's not necessarily, Yusui and Johnson aren't necessarily building you a talent pipeline. They're like going to win you a lot of academy games. So I think picking 8 players is a little smarter. I would probably adjust that. But I think, yeah, under these guidelines, this is what I end up with. Even 7 players would probably be fine, honestly. If you're doing 2 teams, you're expanding 2 new teams, and you each pick 7. Maybe that would be a good option. Yeah. Well, what do you guys think? And then you'd end up with something like this. And then you could try to sign triple or another kind of up and coming mid. Maybe buy Jan or someone like that. Let's do that. So that was my LCS mock expansion draft. If you want to play with your own version of this, I will put the link to the spreadsheet in the video description. So you can click through to there, make your own copy of it, adjust the protections to anything that you think is fits your preferences a little better, and then feel free to play around. Draft with a friend, with 2 of you, or just do it on your own with a single team expansion and have some fun with it. So I hope you enjoyed that. And as we get closer and closer to the end of the year, there will be a lot more Armchair GM style content to look out for.